Identifying first.
Okay, so could you state your full name, date of birth, place of birth, and your current address for us, please?
Sure. My full name is Ramsey, R-A-M-S-E-Y, Peyton, P-E-Y-T-O-N, L-O-C-K-E, Locke Jr. I was born in Victoria, Mississippi, December the 14th, 1925. What else do you ask me?
And your current address.
Current address is 538 Carruthers, C-A-R-R-U-T-H-E-R-S, Collierville, Tennessee.
That is great to have it spelled. That's very good.
A lot of people can't spell it.
All right, so I just kind of wanted to start off by you went to Collierville High School, yes?
No.
Where did you go to high school?
I lived in Victoria, Mississippi, and about five miles up 78 Highway was Red Banks. And I rode a school bus 12 years to Red Banks, graduated there.
Oh.
And I served the sin. I got drafted, and they called me about a few months before I was to graduate. And I told them, I've been all this time, I need to graduate. So they said, well, you come down here and you get sworn in and everything, and you stay until time to graduate. We'll let you go back and stay a few days and graduate. So I did, and I went back and graduated one night. I walked about a couple of miles from my house to 78 Highway and hitchhiked to Holly Springs. Got on a bus to Camp Shelby, and I was in the Army.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I live in Holly Springs.
No kidding?
Yes, sir.
Well, you know where Red Banks is?
Yes, sir.
Well, they did away with the school, the high school, and they still had it.
Yes, sir.
My brother and sister went by Hay.
Yes. So, what was your life like before you got drafted? What kind of stuff did you do? Play sports?
My mother was about to have my sister, and Dad and Mother just had some kind of old house. It wasn't much, and I was 2 years old, and I was kind of sickly, so my grandmother and my grandfather came to see him, and they decided I was pretty sickly, so they took me home with them. And I spent the rest of my life with my grandmother till I went to World War II, and I came back to my grandmother. I came to Collierville in 1947. But I lived on a 160-acre farm. And of course, as a kid, I didn't do anything, but when I was 11, my grandfather passed away, and my grandmother said, well, you're the man of the house, so I milked the cows and fed the hogs and stuff, and then she got rid of all that. After that, I cut wood and did whatever I could to make a few dollars. And my mother lived, my daddy left my mother when my baby brother was a baby, but mother lived walking distance, so I was with my brothers and sisters anytime I wanted to be.
So, when you got drafted, where did you serve? Where did you go to boot camp at?
Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
And what was that like? What was your experience?
I was in the field artillery and wire communications, and of course they gave you a little bit of everything, but they really had me in the wire communications. We had a little switchboard about like they had BD-14 or something like that, or BD-15. And they trained us on that, and then also trained us stringing the wires. And they had a slicked off place out there and a bunch of poles, just like light poles. And you had to go out there and put the gas on, climb the poles.
Wow.
And then I took either 18 or 21 months basic training. And after that, I went to Camp Kilman, New Jersey, and then they sent us down to New York. Put us on a boat and didn't tell us where we were going, but we were on the way 14 days and 14 nights and landed in Le Havre, France.
So, would you say that getting to travel to all those places, was that a good experience for you? Did you like that, or were you more of...
Oh, I loved it, but the only thing, we got to Le Havre and they had us in the back of an open bed truck going to take us somewhere, and all of a sudden there's a little noise and the whole world lit up, I said, God, if you give me about a night, I'll make the rest of this war by myself, because I thought it was a bomb. But it was a flare bomb from the Germans, and they were taking pictures from an oil dump. That's all it was.
So do you have many experiences like that where, I don't know, you were scared, I guess? Like, was it?
Yeah, number one, I was on the in combat less than 6 months, because I'm a young World War II veteran, even though I'm 90. Well, one experience, they took us to someplace with the truck, and then put us out and had us, it was snow all over the ground, deep snow, and they had us walking to wherever we were going. And I was so little, I was either on the front or the back. Well, I was on the back. So we were walking in the dark through the snow, and overcoat, it was so cold, and it was so long on me, I stepped on it and fell down, and when I got up, there's nobody around. Then I was scared, and I turned around and backtracked and found I don't know how far I went, anyway, I found a thing where there were other troops, and the sergeant, I told him my trouble. He said, well, you spend the night here, and in the morning I'll send word where you're supposed to be, and they'll come get you. Well, the guys there had been there a long time. They had been in combat, and they said, well, you're in the infantry now. You'll be on the front lines tomorrow, and you're going to die. Man, I cried and cried. I cried my eyes out. I thought I was dead already, but nothing happened. They took me and put me in a field artillery outfit.
So, would you say that you were close with the people you were stationed with while you were over there?
Oh, yes, indeed. Oh, like brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, they flocked around me and told me, gave me advice what to do and what not to do and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, they were.
Did you keep any of those friendships, like, after the war, like,
yeah,
communicate?
There's a guy named Grunert. He was a German, but he was an American citizen. He was our cook. He was from Chicago. I went to see him a few times, and for a few years, we had reunions, and I'd see all the guys, and we wrote to each other some. And about 4 or 5 years ago, a lady called me and said, we're making the rounds to visit, and his last name was Klingler, I've forgotten his first name, and he was my boss. Said, we're going to be in we're coming to Collierville tomorrow. I hadn't seen him since I left over there. They left earlier because he had a lot of points. So they came out and spent the night, and I took them all over Collierville, and we had a great time. Back then, I don't know whether you ever heard of square shooting, because you're not that old, but they had a guy that ran the Independent, and he had a place up at the little cafe on the square,
Yes, sir.
a table, and people would come in there and just let it all out. They'd talk about whatever they wanted from the mayor on down. And he called it square shooting.
Huh.
So I took them by there, and they talked to them quite a bit and got it in the newspaper. And I took them down and showed them they had a little market down there on the far side of the square. I took them down and showed them what all we had here and where they're growing vegetables and stuff like that they hadn't seen.
That's pretty cool. So, when you were in Europe, did you serve in any other places besides France, or was it just...
Oh, yeah. I landed at Marseille, France, served in France, and it was Alsace-Lorraine then, a little strip between that and Germany. Then we went over into Germany, went to the southern part of Germany, into Austria, and when the war ended, we were in Salzburg, Austria.
That's pretty cool. So, what made you come to Collierville after you left the war?
Well, my uncle had come home a long time before I did. He said, let's buy a little store up at Victoria, Mississippi. And we did, had a little money, and it didn't work out. And a guy at Bahia had been budding with me, wanted me to work at a service station for him, so I did. Now I'm old enough, been to war and back, but I had a girlfriend who was still in school. And I was courting her, and she'd walk, a lot of kids would walk, this was a cafe and a service station. And the kids would walk by there going that direction and get them a Coke or something. And they had to cross the highway. So every afternoon I walked her across the highway. So I walked her across one afternoon and I got back. He said, Locke, you got to choose between your girlfriend and your job. I said, that's no problem. You can take the job. So I just gathered up my stuff and went home. And I didn't have a job for a while. My great uncle was building a building down here. It was going to be a new Ford place. Didn't have one there then. And he had a son my age, and we were almost like brothers. So he said, well, Daddy probably give you a job, or somebody will. So I went over there with him, and they demanded was going to own the place. Gave me a job. I was just a flunky. Mm-hmm. And when the building was finished and the Ford dealership opened, he kept me.
Huh.
May I ask, which service station did you work at?
Ross, R-O-S-S. I was in about 46. I came here in 47.
Do you know where that was located?
Sure.
Where we have a couple of maps here of 1940. So here is
Now I'm talking about the surf station in Bahia.
Bahalia.
Mhm.
Okay. So not in Collierville.
Oh, no, ma'am.
Okay.
Now, I might know some of that over there, but
Yes, because this is an aerial photograph. So here's the square.
when I came here, the square of the Collierville, the city limits, you could almost throw a rock from one end to the other.
Yeah. This was the city.
That's right.
limits. Yep.
You're right.
So yep. So here Main Street went down to
Kill.
yeah. And just
Kill was out by the VFW.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it wasn't very big.
No, ma'am.
No.
It sure wasn't. When the Ford dealership was built, that was the only business on that end of town. Everything else was houses and cotton patches and just whatever. Piper had a plow point plant over there where it remains today. The building, well, part of the building is still over there. And then,
What kind of plant?
you know what plows are?
Yeah, this,
Plow.
yeah.
Okay. They made them, shaped them, and filed them, and sharpened them, and stuff like that.
Where was that located?
Just across the highway from where the new car lot, you know where the car lot is down there, 72 in Poplar? Well, just across that, past that service station on the far side. It's where they tore all that stuff down back there.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit beside that. It was, well, one of the Pipers was mayor here for a long time, but two brothers owned Piper's Industry or whatever it was, but they were in the manufacturing of farm equipment, I guess you'd say. And the next thing, Mr. Joe Looney he had a garage uptown here. He owned a lot of land down there, and he built a restaurant where the car lot is now. And he and his wife operated it for a little while, and his daughter and her husband, they turned it over to them. And it was Joe's Drive-In. Mr. Joe Looney is who it was named after, but it stayed there, of course, a long time to build. Cox got a hold of it. Ray closed it. So they started having, there was a service station built, and then Joe's Drive-In. And way down the line, Kelsey Chevrolet was up here, and they built the Chevrolet place down there. I watched all that now. I was pretty young.
So, sorry to backtrack a little bit, but like,
Sure.
when you were before the war, how did you, and like your friends, I guess, like how did y'all feel about the war? Like, were you excited that you got drafted, or was
Yeah,
just,
I was ready to go.
you were ready to go?
My grandmother had a sitting rule book catalog about that big, and I had got to talk to her into ordering me khaki shirts and khaki pants to wear at school. Yeah, I was ready to go. Now my friend, we graduated together, and he cried and cried. He's gonna get killed and all that. Well, he got drafted, and they made him a cook, so he didn't have any problem.
Lucky. So was that common for your friends? Was it more like on the end of the scale? Was it like more your friends were like you, ready to go,
No.
or was it scared?
No,
A lot
I wouldn't say
scared.
they're scared now. I don't know, but well, number one, there was only 4 of us in the high school graduating class. 4. I'm the only one
What
left.
year was that?
44.
So, was the class number so small because of the war, or was it just because it was a
No.
small town?
Just a small town.
town.
Well, it was made up mostly of people that worked on farms. Some had some girls there that up in maybe the 9th, 10th, 8th, what they got big enough they had to work on their daddy's farm a lot during cotton picking and chopping time. They had to be off for a week or two. Had to work on the farm.
Yes, sir.